podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Matt Ohayon with you on the Sick Podcast. Welcome to your weekend, everyone. It is Friday, June 6th. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Energy Transportation Group is a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. Are you looking for the ultimate entertainment destination? Well, Playground is your ticket to nonstop thrills. Experience heart-pumping gaming action and a world-class poker experience. Playground is the 2025 winner of the Fan Choice Best Poker Room at the Global Poker Awards. Indulge your taste buds at our incredible restaurants, then let loose with live music and electrifying DJs. Enjoy unmatched customer service just minutes away from downtown Montreal, right across the Mercier Bridge. Why settle for the ordinary when you can have the extraordinary? Playground. It's all here. Visit playground.ca to discover more. And of course, by Bittt Tibi beer. Bittt Tibi has launched their new Ultra Lager, a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer perfect for those hot summer days with only 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs, and 4% alcohol per can. Available in packs of 6 and 12 in grocery stores and dépanneurs across the province of Quebec. Ultra light and ultra refreshing. And of course, by Betway, go all the way with Betway and get a free bet up to $200 if your first bet loses. Scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the details section to create an account and redeem your welcome offer. Offer is only available for new customers. Terms and conditions apply. Offer is not available in Ontario. You must be 18 years or older, and please play responsibly. Now, for those who are seeking news, I'm sorry, that's the off season. That's what's going on. So for our haters out there that, are constantly in our comment section, just annoyed with our rumor mill that we continue to play out scenarios. Listen, you do this at the bar with your friends. You don't like it? Go to another channel. But for those that do like it, you're in luck, because my favorite guest, Mr. Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, is here, and that's what we're just going to be doing. We're going to be playing out scenarios of who the Canadiens can sign, who they can trade for, because hey, that's the name of the game in the offseason. And just so our fans know, we were the ones who went on a podcast and we debated Patrik Laine last summer, and then it happened. So hey, crazier things have happened. Stu, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and that's this time of the year, right? Once the team in your city's out of the NHL playoffs, the speculation starts. What's going to happen? So draft coming up the weekend after next, and then free agency on July 1st, and then pieces will start falling into place. But until then, yeah, it's fun to speculate and wonder what might happen. That's
it. And that's this is the fun part, because this is my favorite time of year in terms of hockey discussion, because anything could happen. Literally anything is within the realm of possibility. Like, who could have imagined that Patrik Laine would be traded to the Montreal Canadiens 2-3 years ago? And then it happened. So, hey, anyway.
Well, the possibility last summer, and we talked about it last summer. And the thing with Kent Hughes, one of the things that him and Jeff Gorton are very good at is keeping their cards close to the vest. And you don't not a lot of stuff gets leaked from these two guys since they've taken over. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens this summer. I'm looking forward to it.
So let's start with Patrik Laine, because that's something that's someone we haven't really talked about all that much, because through this season we've talked about Jake Evans, we talked about the defense, we've talked about the entire forward lineup, but we really haven't touched upon Patrik Laine. And I think he's a very interesting player this offseason, because there's two sides. One, we all heard the Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton end of year press conference where they specifically underlined they're looking for compete, which I think it's very clear. We all know that Patrik Laine's play wasn't exactly up to snuff last year, and when it came to terms of compete. But at the same time, the Canadiens don't make the playoffs without Patrik Laine. So I don't know. I'm kind of in the camp that after the playoffs, that if they get their wish and they get a number two centerman, and they get a right-hand shot defenseman, and they have the ability to pick and choose who will be on their roster, I think they're going to do everything they can, given the circumstance, without leaving a hole in the lineup, to not have Patrik Laine on the team next year.
Yeah, I think they would like to trade Patrik Laine this summer if they can. I don't know if they can. I don't know what the demand would be for him. There was very little demand last summer. One of the reasons the Canadiens got him is they were the only team that was willing to take on his whole contract and close to $9 million. And at the time, I wrote a column saying it was a low-risk move by Kent Hughes, and I still believe it was. They gave up Jordan Harris, who probably wasn't going to earn a spot with the Canadiens last season. Plus, the Canadiens got a second-round draft pick in the trade. So it was a smart trade. And you're absolutely right. And Kent Hughes mentioned that at his postseason news conference. The Canadiens don't make the playoffs this season without Patrik Laine. That boost he gave them when he first came in with all those power play goals, there's 8 power play goals or whatever it was in his first 9 games, and the wins they had during that period, that's what got them into the playoffs. So they don't get into the playoffs without Patrik Laine. So just from that standpoint, it was a good trade. I think the main reason they like to move him this offseason is to free up almost $9 million in cap space going into free agency. I think they figure they could probably spend that money elsewhere. But the other thing that was interesting that Hughes said at the end of the season news conference, Patrik Laine's compete level isn't where it should be. And factor in he was coming off a knee injury also, right? So he was behind the 8 ball starting the season. But Kent Hughes said he wanted to learn, like he wanted to do better. And I think in that Canadiens locker room, it's such a good room that if you're not working hard, you stand out like a sore thumb. There's positive there in that the Canadiens management seems to think that he's willing to put in the work and try and become more of that 200-foot player that we've seen Marty St. Louis turn Cole Caulfield into, that Nick Suzuki's always been. So would they like to move? I think they'd like to move him to free up the cap space, but if nobody was willing to take on that salary last offseason, the full salary apart from the Canadiens are going to end up probably having to eat some of that money if they want to move him. And it might be better off just keeping him and then hoping that he picks up his compete level, hoping he can score not just on the power play next season, but at 5-on-5, and then see what his value might be at the trade deadline, which might be a lot higher since the last year of his contract. There'd be less money to pay him, and he could give a team that's struggling on the power play or needs help on the power play going into the playoffs a big boost, and they might be willing to give up more at that point. So I'd sort of be surprised if they're able to move Laine during the offseason, but I'd be surprised if they don't move him by the trade deadline next year.
Yeah, I would be surprised as well. But you'd have to imagine, so all things being equal, Laine, I don't have the number in front of me of how many games he did play, but, let's call it maybe half the season, a little bit under, maybe, if I had to guess. So if he is there for a full season, I guess just by math, double his goal total, maybe -5, you go through a slump, whatever the case may be. So that's a lot of goals. And this isn't exactly a situation of, in what we compared him to, or not compared him to, but put him in the same sentence as Mike Hoffman of when he was with the Canadiens, because Patrik Laine has way more talent than Mike Hoffman did. There would be you would have to think there would be interest in him, especially after what his value was last year, proving he could still play at an NHL level or at least score at an NHL level this year. So again, I don't think it's the end of the world. Like if the Canadiens don't acquire a second line centerman or at least fill that hole with a stopgap player, it's not the end of the world, but that's a failure. If they go into next season with Patrik Laine on their roster, that's nowhere near a failure. I just believe that if they had it their way, they would get Laine off the roster and then, free up some money to either bank that for Demidov or Hudson, or throw it at a free agent like Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Hudson, because they can negotiate with him starting July 1st, and I think the Canadiens would like to lock him up sooner rather than later, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But, talk about Laine, 52 games last year, 20 goals, 15 on the power play, though, right? So, and Canadiens continue. This is a team that struggles to score goals. I mean, Laine was 4th on the team in goals last season, despite missing 30 games. The only guys ahead of him were Caulfield with 37, Suzuki with 30, and Gallagher with 21. So they still need goals, right? Whether they're power play or even strength. And as you mentioned, Ken Hughes spoke at the end of the season that, and Jeff Gordon, that size isn't going to be their main measuring stick. I wrote a column about this yesterday, talking about Brad Marchand playing for the Panthers. Size isn't going to be their biggest measuring stick. It's going to be compete level. And Ken Hughes said, we have some big guys already that their playoff experience, first time in the playoffs, and they need more physicality out of them. And the two guys who jump out with that would be Slavkovsky, who's still young, and Patrik Laine, who can be a lot more physical at the size that he's at. But I don't think it's not if they're not able to trade Patrik Laine this offseason, I don't think it's a big negative. But again, if they can, it just frees up money for them. But they have to bring in some guys who can score, because I can't, getting into the playoffs with only one line that can score consistently, they're not going to get there. They need to find somebody else to replace those 20 goals that Patrik Laine scored last season. He was still minus 14, despite scoring 20 goals in 52 games. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And again, I don't know if they can trade him without eating half of that salary, which I don't think is necessarily a great thing for them moving forward. But as we're mentioning, there's a lot of speculation going into the offseason. That's one of the things that it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Laine seemed to be really happy in Montreal. He even said when he came here, he prefers playing in a hockey environment where it matters. Excuse me, I've seen some photos on social media of him. I think he's still around in Montreal, sort of walking his dog in old Montreal. And he seems to like it here. And again, you got to factor in that he came back from a knee injury, right? And you don't know. We saw what happened with Kirby Dach coming back from that knee injury. I was at the Lyle Rocket end of season news conference yesterday. David Reinbacher spoke about how his knee is still only at 95%. He's still having swelling with it. It's still in the back of his mind. He's thinking about it when he's playing. So I think people still need to remember when you're talking about Patrik Laine, he is who he is. There was red flags when they got him. But I think that knee injury really, it didn't affect his shot, but I think it affected him a lot of other ways, the same way it affected Kirby Dach with his knee injury.
Yeah, and it is a real factor. So it'll be interesting, because he opted to not have surgery, because if he had surgery, probably would have ended his season effectively if he did. So he did that for a multitude of reasons. One, he probably knew that if he had that surgery, his NHL career would have effectively not been over, but right next to over. But anyways, I think that Laine could be a very, very interesting piece, because that's the other thing, is that this is what I didn't like when at the end of the season, when everyone was kind of ragging on him, myself included, because there's certain things that are inexcusable. The compete level was inexcusable, but you saw the emotion on him on the bench when, someone on the team, be it him or someone else on the team, took a penalty and it was a chintzy call. He's getting up, he's yelling with the rest of the team. He was bought in. It was just, what was going on upstairs, in relation to his knee. Was he still thinking about it? Was he not? We don't know, and we probably won't.
Sure he was. Reinbacher spoke about that yesterday, saying it was in his mind, and just your knee's not, and especially Reinbacher said his knee is now at 95%. So it was less than that when he first came back playing, and it would have been the same with Patrik Laine. And again, at the end of the season news conference, Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon talked about how Kirby Dach not just has to be better physically prepared going into training camp next season, but mentally prepared also to try and put now 2 knee surgeries for him is going to be even more difficult. But yeah, for any athlete coming back from that, and especially in a sport like hockey, the knees. I mean, Kirby Dach, can you say you could notice in his skating, he couldn't skate like he did before coming back last season. And you wonder how much that factored into Laine's sort of lack of compete or back check. But I mean, again, he's got a reputation for that, but you multiply that with the knee injury. And I think that explains some of the issues he had last season going forward. But again, I mean, they got to replace those 20 goals if he's not coming back, if they're trading him.
So that's where it leads me to, the Athletic came out with a list of off-season, trade boards. So the top targets of the summer. So this was a trade list. I mentioned a player, Nikolai Ehlers, who is a unrestricted free agent. I've always liked Ehlers. He was always my guy. Just, when you hitch your wagon to someone coming out of a draft, Winnipeg Jets drafted him, and I always really liked him. Always had him on my fantasy team. Just a really all-around good player. Been a scorer his whole life. So I really like Nikolai Ehlers. The other thing is that, just looking at the Canadiens and where do they go from here? So it's funny because we called this a copycat. It is a copycat league. And I kind of hitched my wagon to Dallas this offseason, when talking about who you would want to model yourself after. And, in our previous, or it's either the last week's or 2 episodes ago, where I said, there's nothing really you could take from Edmonton, so let's look at Dallas. And that's not entirely true. We can take something from Edmonton. And my friend pointed this out to me during game 1 when we were watching that game. Edmonton's youngest player on their roster is 23 years old. That's their youngest player. The next one, I think it's Vasily Podkolzin. The next one is Evan Bouchard, who is 24. They are a vastly experienced team. So I think while, people can have fun and start to think, the Canadiens made the playoffs, they're going to have a linear progression. That's the time where we've been saying they might not make the playoffs next year because these are still kids we're talking about.
Well, I mean, the youngest team in years to make the playoffs, right? This year,
right?
The Canadiens, and you mentioned Ehlers. It's interesting too because he was 29 years old. He would bring experience, right? He'd bring some offense, and he's not a centerman; he's a winger. But Jeff Gorton spoke about that at the end of the season news conference, also saying that all the focus on getting a second line center. He said there's other ways to improve your top 6, not necessarily with a center, but bringing in a winger. He mentioned wingers that get 100 points. There's not a lot of them in the NHL. But Ehlers, as you said, a consistent 25 goal scorer throughout his career, pretty much, right? 63 points, just looking up, plus 14 this season, plus 27 last season. Obviously responsible defensively. And, a guy that would look like a really good fit here in Montreal, right? At 29 years old, not too old, still good years ahead of him. And that experience, you mentioned the Oilers too. You got Draisaitl, you got the best player in the world and one of the top 5 players in the world on the same team, right? That doesn't happen very often. And Edmonton, they went through a lot of growing pains coming up too. So you're right with the Canadiens, and we spoke about this. They might miss the playoffs again next season, or because they are so young, and they might get even younger during this offseason. And Pascal Vincent spoke about this yesterday at the Rocket News Conference, saying it's really hard to make the playoffs in the AHL and the NHL. It's really hard for both of them. And now you've got the Canadiens had their Rocket team and their NHL team in the playoffs this season. That's a good sign moving forward as far as just the depth they have at how young this team still is.
Yeah, but so to me, it was just an interesting point because everyone's thinking about the progression of the Canadiens, where they could be next year, where they could be in 2 years, even 3 years down the road. And I think it's important to note that that was a wake-up call for even me, because I even got a little bit excited about who didn't get excited about the Canadiens, making the playoffs this year, youngest team to do it in, probably ever. And you just take a look at, you don't have to look at the stats. Yes, they have Connor McDavid. Yes, they have Leon Draisaitl. Just look at the ages of the Edmonton Oilers, and they're just an old team. Not old. They're not long in the tooth, but they're an experienced team, as are the Florida Panthers. None of those teams' best players are 19, 20, 21 years old. That's just not how it works. These guys are men. So you look at how the Canadiens played against the Washington Capitals last year, this past year. Yeah, they hung with them, but Washington was a team of men. Full-grown men.
More physical, more experienced.
But that's it. Slavkovsky, sure, he's 6'3", 6'4", 2, whatever. He's still got to fill out his body. There's other players like that on the team. We saw with Cole Caulfield from the moment he got drafted to now. Did he get taller? No, but he got thicker.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of players need on the Montreal Canadiens. They just need to become men.
With Slavkovsky, I mean, he already is a man physically. I mean, he was huge when he was 18. I remember interviewing the day before the draft, and I couldn't believe how big he was for a kid that age. But he's a man child, right? Like he hasn't realized how big and strong he is, and he hasn't realized how he has to use his physicality better. And he mentioned, you have to play like Brady Tkachuk or Matthew Tkachuk to be successful in the NHL, and he does. He has to use that better to his advantage moving forward. Excuse me. He's aware of that. The Canadiens are aware of that. Some of the guys do need to get bigger and stronger. They were talking to Pascal Vincent yesterday, talking about David Reinbacher, said he's got to get bigger and stronger physically. Still, he's like 6'3" and almost 200 pounds, but he doesn't have that muscle that he's going to need to make the next step to the NHL. But the only way to gain this experience, like the Panthers and the Oilers and these teams, is to play the games. And that's why it was so important that the Canadiens got into the playoffs this season. And Juraj Slavkovsky realized how much more physical it is. And Lane Hudson realized how much more physical it is. And they realized how dominant a guy like Tom Wilson can be in a playoff series. And Alex Ovechkin throwing his weight around all over the place. And how you have to have grit and you have to play tough or you're not going to go anywhere. And the Florida Panthers are the poster team for that, right? When they went out and got Brad Marchand at the trade deadline, he fits in perfect on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Playing against Brad Marchand and Matthew Tkachuk for 7 games is not going to be fun. And they have a lot of guys like that on that team that are that way. So the Canadian, and they realize that. I mean, it was good that Jeff Gorton said there's a lot of things we need to improve. We need to get bigger and stronger. We need to score more goals, and compete level is at the top of the list. And you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs with all the talent and skill they have, they don't compete in the playoffs. That's why they lose. They don't have the grit. And that's why they just don't win in the playoffs. And the Canadiens, they have the young guys like Cole Caulfield plays with grit. Cole Caulfield plays, and so does Lane Hudson for a little guy. He's not afraid of they have a lot of, Alexandre Carrier, that hit he took from Wilson was grit on his part, being willing to take that hit to get the puck and dump it in. But they just need some of their, the guys like Slavkovsky and guys like that. They need to get more men. Like you say, Chris Nyland always says that all the time. The Canadiens need more men. He talks back to when they won the Cup in '86 and all the men, the Mike McPhees of the world, the Brian Skrudlins of the world, these guys who are just not fun to play against. They were aggressive and hard every shift. And the Canadiens realized that. And, they got Florian Jacki down in the AHL, talking with Pascal Vincent about him yesterday. He said he says his hockey mind is so smart as a player and he learns so quickly. And that's something that when Florian Jacki, the first thing you think about is toughness and size, right? You don't think about his hockey mind if you're not having one. And that's Pascal Vincent said that's one of the things that impressed them the most. So they have guys like that coming up, and they're obviously looking for those kind of guys moving forward. Ehlers is another guy. You mentioned him earlier. There's a guy who has a compete level to him, right? And that's, again, the column I wrote yesterday, you're not going to win in the playoffs if you don't have that grit on your team. And the compete level. You just have to have it.
It's a combination of grit, compete, and experience, because I just took a look, because the lesson to take from Florida is that, when they won the Cup last year, I think there was something like 3 or 4 players that they had drafted that were on their roster. That's it. 3 or 4. And the rest of them was signing, trading, and striking at the right time, getting lucky with some deals and all that. But I just took a look down Florida's roster. They have 2 players who are not their primary, contributors, that are 21 and 22, who are Anton Lundell and Sam Askevich, two great players, but they're not, if they are not on the roster, I mean, Florida would probably be fine. Their youngest impact player is Matthew Tkachuk, and he's 26 years old. How old? Nick Suzuki is what, 25? Yeah. And he's their oldest impact player. So, this is going to take a lot of time for the Canadiens. And again, it's just that balancing act of that we mentioned last week. How much can we add when we also have guys coming up that we view as a part of our future? It's fascinating.
It's asset management, right? When Ken Hughes first came in, it was all about obtaining more assets, draft picks, young players, right? Draft picks, young players. Now they've got a lot. So that allows them now to make some moves this offseason to bring in some older guys, more experienced, more veteran guys, right? So they've set themselves up in a good position like that. But, the other thing I mentioned in a column this week, watching these playoffs, you realize how far away the Canadiens are from getting where they want to be, which is their goal is to be a team that can compete for the Stanley Cup every year, right? Like Dallas and Florida and Edmonton and those teams are right now. And it's going to take them a little bit longer to get there. And part of that is getting more experienced guys and bringing in more of these guys with grit and whatnot. But they're in a position now that they can move forward with that and give up some of these young prospects and draft picks to try and bring in more experienced guys to fill those roles.
Well, that's it. And it's funny because on this athletic list of the top trade targets, on that list, and this is Chris Johnston who wrote it, I'm just scrolling through right now just to see the position of where it is. The Canadiens' first round pick is number 8, number 8 target. We don't know which one.
And they got two. Well, they got 2 first round picks.
They got 2 back.
I wouldn't be surprised to see them trade both of them.
There you go. Neither would I. And
speed up the process.
Exactly, and what that return would be. So, for all intents and purposes, I'll even throw out a name because we mentioned it before. You talked about how Jeff Gordon said there are other ways to find scoring. It doesn't have to be quote unquote a center. It could be a winger that drives the play of a line, and that player, again, it's a crazy scenario, but given the state of their team, you'd have to be shocked if they ran it back with primarily the same roster. But I'll throw out Artemi Panarin. That's a 100-point winger. What would it cost? I have no idea. We're not going to play that game. But that's the type of player that you're looking to acquire because if you're not going to get a center, because this is obviously the crown jewel, exaggerated scenario, but he's that type of player. He's a winger who drives the play of his line, who you hope that's what Demidov can be one day, but he's not there yet. So he drives the play of the line, and frankly, can he be moved? I'm not saying he's going to be moved to the Montreal Canadiens, but can he be moved? I don't know. The Rangers, how many times could they go back with the same roster over and over and over again, and it doesn't work? At a certain point, you got to retool or you got to rebuild. So
now they're the new coach, so we'll see how that goes too.
Well, that's it. And for the sake of it, this is another point: is that the first name on that trade board by Chris Johnston is Chris Kreider. So Chris Kreider is a 50-goal scorer. If he could be traded and, Mika Zibanejad might get traded, Artemi Panarin is not an untouchable. When you're in a position like you're the New York Rangers, nobody's untouchable. But anyways, so enough about that. I know that, so for all of our viewers and listeners, this is a pre-recorded episode. So this is going to be, we're going to be going live in the middle of, game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final. But Stu, surprised to see Edmonton pull that one off in game 1?
Yeah, just because Florida doesn't usually blow a 2-goal lead. But again, it goes back to what we were saying. I mean, you got 2 of the best players in the world on the Edmonton roster, right? And then the only thing they're going to call in overtime is a puck over glass, right? And it's kind of chintzy that's how the game's decided, but that's, the referees put their whistles away for everything except that, it seems. But no, I'm not surprised. I still think Florida is going to win the series. I thought that before it started. I think that's still now. Edmonton obviously at home. I mean, that crowd, they were feeding off of that. Draisaitl's a special player, right? Scoring. David McDavid's a special player. But I just think that again, Florida's just got the experience, the grit, right down the lineup, right top to bottom. They all play, and Bobrovsky. I think Stuart Skinner is still questionable. Excuse me, in a 7-game series. So I think Florida's got the better goalie, and I just think they have the better depth when it comes to the grit and the way they play.
It's funny because I did a lot of reading before the series, the kicked off. Obviously, we had how long did we have between this Cup final and the conference finals? But so I was doing a lot of reading, and I read this one part of a column, and it said, I kept picking against Florida against my better judgment, and from now on until they lose a series, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to have them make me look like an idiot again. This team is just really unbelievable. I mean, it's wave after wave of attack, and Edmonton has that capability. I mean, man, who's been really impressing me these playoffs, and this is the exact type of player that you need to find, just as like the little finishing touch on your team is have a player like this in your organization, is Kasperi Kapanen. Because man, oh man, this guy was just something ignited in him in the playoffs, because he scored, I think it was in the series against Dallas, and that was his first goal since January. And now he just made play after play flying around the ice in game 1. It was quite something to see. So that's a nice piece of depth that teams need if they are going to win the Stanley Cup, because you need that wave after wave of attack that Florida has. But man, I don't know, Stu. I think my brain is telling me Florida is going to win. Sorry, my gut is telling me Florida is going to win, but my brain is saying Connor McDavid will not lose in 2 straight Stanley Cup Finals. He will not allow it to happen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Kapanen, you actually had 5 goals in 57 regular season games. He's got 3 goals in 8 playoff games. Perfect example of Mark Bergevin's old line: certain players get you to the playoffs, and certain players get you through the playoffs, right? And that's a perfect example of it right there. And you need that. And you go back to 93 and 86 when the Habs won their last 2 Stanley Cups. I remember 86 it was Paul DiPietro was a star, right? That was 93, and one of the key players on that team that helped them win the cup. And you go back to 86, there was guys who pitched in that you wouldn't expect to be key players, and you need that in the playoffs. And you guys like that to come up and compete and perform the way that those guys that have. And Kapanen is another example.
Well, for the Canadiens, who it was, not the year that they went to the Cup final, because, that was really the first line that drove them. And then the experience of Corey Perry and really all the players that you expected to pull them through. Josh Anderson he's a tough player to play. That's a playoff player. Philip Deneau, that's a playoff player. Corey Perry, playoff player. He's still doing it now. It's amazing. Now, who it was before that, when the Canadiens went on a couple of runs, was Dale Weiss, because that guy,
remember him against the Bruins,
exactly, just against the Bruins. This guy scored in overtime against Tampa. He was a Bruins killer. He even pitched in offensively against the Rangers sometimes. That's the type of player that you just need to have on your roster that will just find it within themselves in the playoffs to just find the extra gear. So for the Canadiens, their Kasperi Kapanen was Dale Weiss.
Yeah, and then just going back to the 93 team here, looking it up, in the playoffs, Stamfus led the team with 11 goals. Muller had 10, and then Paul DiPietro with 8. Gilbert Dion with 6. It was guys that Ed Ronan had 2 goals. You go down and you don't win. It's the hardest trophy to win in sports is a Stanley Cup. 2 months playing and you can't. You're not just going to – Edmonton's not going to win just because of Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And Florida's not going to win just because of Tkachuk. And you got your fourth-line guys have to contribute.
And,
and that's why the Canadiens, one of the reasons they lost against Washington, they just didn't have that depth from below their top 6. Even their second line, all the offense came from the first line.
And you know what? That's one lesson to take from these playoffs, and really every playoffs, is that the more the league changes in the style of play, in the regular season, we We went from having a top 6 and a bottom 6 to a top 9, and even your fourth line isn't just a goon line anymore. That's all changing, and that's well and good. But one thing that does not change is the team that hits the hardest and grinds you down and is the toughest opponent to play against. That's usually the cream that rises to the top, because even if you look at the series that just happened in the first round, it was Minnesota against Vegas. Minnesota is an incredibly skilled team, incredibly skilled, and they had Vegas on the ropes. But eventually, Vegas, what happens? Vegas was just bigger, meaner, stronger, more experienced. They took over that series and they found a way to gut it out when Minnesota basically let it slip through their hands. But that's what's going to happen in the playoffs. So the more this league changes, you just look at the playoffs. It's always the team that is able to punch you in the mouth, and they're going to give you the extra shot, and they're just more irritating. They have the thorns in the side, and they're going to physically dominate. Those are the teams that are going to be always in the mix for a Stanley Cup.
I mean, another sign of how the Canadiens have so much further to go if they want to be a legitimate contender. I mean, they lost in 5 games to Washington, right? And then Washington loses in 5 games to Carolina. And then Carolina loses in 5 games to Florida. So what Washington did to the Canadiens, Carolina then did to Washington, and then Florida did to Carolina. So it just shows you that how much further the Canadiens need to go to be able to compete with the Floridas and the Edmontons in the NHL.
Yeah, it's really entertaining. I mean, finally, after the conference finals were a big letdown, as were the second round was okay. I mean, really the only good series in the second round of the playoffs was Florida and Toronto. But really after that, I mean, both series in the conference finals ending in 5 games. Yeah. I think, listen, I if putting money on it, if I bet with my brain, it's Edmonton all the way. But I think, Stu, you and I can agree this one's going 7 as well. Yeah,
at least 6. And probably 7. I still think Florida will come out at the end. I just think when they need that extra punch, whether figuratively or literally, they'll have it. And again, the goaltending, I think Bobrovsky, when he's on, he's hard to beat.
Well, that's it. Stu, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk next week.
All right, you too.
I'm Matt Ohayon. Thank you, producer Shane, back at Master Control. And just a quick shout out, Mason Brenthouse. Love you, buddy. We'll catch you next week.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBita.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.